I'm an anthropologist, and in anthropology, as a number of you are aware of, we're interested in humanity, the present, the past, throughout the globe. And in anthropology, we have some assumptions that we make. There is a great deal of antiquity in the earth. Humans are a part of that antiquity, and in some cases we can know a little bit about it. In many cases, we know very little. Humans are a part of this whole process. And in anthropology, we try to basically, I always raise the question with students, what does it mean to be a human being? Especially in a sardine setting like this, right? And archaeology is a sub-area of anthropology, and in that, we try to investigate past material remains. We try to construct what might have taken place in the past, and I want to emphasize we have to be careful that we do not reconstruct, because we do not. We only are constructing from the present of what we know. We really don't know what took place in the past. We'll talk more about that later. And we do a lot of interpretation about the social organization, the processes that are taking place. And one of the things that's critical in archaeology that I always find very important is that try to distinguish what is part of the natural world and what is not a part of the natural world. And then it often falls into the domain, maybe, that is what humans can do. Now, there are other animal forms that can trick us at times. We have to be aware of that. Okay. Early Americans came into this part of the universe probably 20,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago. There's a lot of open debate yet as to how early that was. But there were undoubtedly multiple migrations that came in. I'll show you another slide on that in a minute. They're coming from Asia in general. And if you've been aware of some of the recent literature, publicity, there's more interest in maybe coming from parts of Europe, which throws a whole new turmoil in terms of the biological background. And these people were traveling, they're nomadic, and when they come in, one of the things that's fascinating is they come into the North America area, but very quickly we find evidence of them all the way into Central America and clear to the tip of South America, Tierra del Fuego area, and which is very amazing. They moved, you might say rapidly, but if you calculate it over hundreds of years, you can migrate pretty easily on foot quite a few miles. They're biological humans. If we should look at humans 20,000 years ago from the skeletal remains, it would look no different than what we see in this room today. There's not been any significant changes. Although I did see a recent report that came out, mental capacities may be diminishing. I've been teaching that for at least 40 years, and so I'm glad to see some support for that. Okay, and of course, basically all we can say is cranial capacity. Mental capacity and cranial capacity are not the same, but there does not seem to be any increase in the cranial bulk itself. They're hunting, gathering, collecting, and they're living in small groups, 20, 30, and these are fairly strongly tied to kinship. They control fire. They have very sophisticated implements and stones, bone, antler, teeth are used, ivory. the domestic dog is a part of their practice, their baggage when they come into the Americas. Yes. A map showing you kind of the routes that may be taking place, but in general, moving quickly across the globe. Yes. In the Southwest, we probably have some of the evidence of people here as almost as early as the earliest Americans in the New World, and we sometimes refer to them as a Paleo-Indian. Again, that nomadic lifestyle. By about 2000 BC, we begin to get some simple agricultural domestic practices, the domestication of maize or corn, some beans, sunflower seeds, sunflower plant, and various squashes. And by about 100 to 200 AD, we begin to get settled communities. And that is a part of course, what we're finding in this area. And agriculture may be becoming a little bit more intense. We get to get the bow and arrow appears as opposed to just spear or throwing spears. By 700 AD, there are rooms that are made out of adobe. They sometimes referred to as wattle and daub, and we still use that practice today. We call it the stick housing. We have studding, put up studs, and then cover it with plaster board. In the past, as you see in this picture, half of you can see, the rest of you cannot. But it's just mud walls with twigs woven in between, and then I should say they're posts with twigs woven between and then plastered with mud. A very common technique. That is probably what we find first of all at the Tecolote Pueblo. Seems something like this. By 700, we begin to get a much more social stratification. Specialists, maybe be religious leaders. People are making pottery. And some may be becoming very good stone tool manufacturers. Next. Now here, by 1100, we begin to get those large Pueblo centers, regional centers that you are very familiar with. Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, Casas Grandes, if you've been down there in northern Mexico, and the Rio Grande Valley has some evidence of that. We do not have anything like that in this region that we're aware of. Yes. In the Southwest, it is often divided into some sub-areas. There's the term Anasazi, which many of you are familiar with. It has been a part of our life for many years. Today, in archaeology, we use the term Puebloan. Anasazi, in many cases, is not acceptable to many of the Puebloan people. And so Puebloan is used in this photo, of course, it uses Anasazi. In the south of here, there's the Mogollon region. Then over in Arizona and northern Sonora, the Hohokam region. These are some of the major areas that have been divided into units that seem to have particular cultural, lifestyle behaviors that are kind of unique and different from each other. Now, one of the things I find fascinating is there is the history of the work at Tecolote. In 1917, in the summer, there is an Andover expedition on a reconnaissance trip into the Rio Grande Valley. This comes out of the east, and of course, there's a lot of innovations coming out of the east into the southwest in these early years. And I've recorded here some of the things that they observed when they came into the Tecolote Valley and they looked at the Tecolote site. And they noticed that there are high cliffs along the river. They mentioned like 30 feet high. I don't know that it was that much. They see some ash pits. They see bones coming out. They see a lot of pot shards. They estimate that the ruin itself is 230 by 100 yards. There are building stones on the surface of sandstone. There's 1.5, about a foot to and a half square. There is corrugated ware. There's black and white wares, ceramics. And they said there's no obsidian, you know, the volcanic glass, which we have. There is some, but they didn't see it at the time. And there's some shell. So that's what they observed in 1917 when that expedition came through the Tecolote Valley. Yes. Now, in 1919, you've heard of Alfred Kidder. And Alfred Kidder is associated with what?
Pecos.
Yes, Pecos. And when he started in the teens to work at Pecos, but in the July and August of 1929, there's an excavation that is taking place at Tecolote. And this excavation is very special as you look at it in terms of archaeology. When I went to school in archaeology 3 or 4 years ago, my wife said it was longer than that, but in the 60s, at the University of Colorado, it was common, and I have a friend who still lives in Los Alamos who will remind me of that, that she's should not be in archaeology. And so in 1929, there are 3 women who are excavating at Tecolote. Isabel Kelly, Frances Watkins, and Eva Horner. And in terms of the history of the field, that is amazing. Now, Alfred Kidder would come up and supervise them to put in a little bit of the testosterone, I guess. But anyhow, okay. Oh, I'm sorry, go back there. But there is a picture of the site, and there are mounds there. And I brought my fancy little thing that's supposed to point, but it won't point this far. But if you'll look there in the picture on the right, there's a mound, and then there's another one kind of in the middle, one to the far, the left, and then 2 in the back, a little ways to the near left. Yeah, see those, Joe? Yes, and then back. Yes. Okay. That is the Tecolote site. Okay. And so when people say that, I mean, you know, they've seen Chaco and they see place and they see this and they say, "What are you doing out there?" Okay. So I just summarized some of the things that they did in 1929. They investigated a lot of masonry walled rooms. And I find that's very interesting because you saw that picture just a minute ago, you didn't see a stone. And when I went out there in the early 70s, I didn't see any either. Now, I suspect the practice has been going on for really thousands of years. Recycling is not new. So when they went out there in 1929 and worked, and you'll see some pictures in a minute, there are a lot of stone structures, but they're not there. Now, someday, maybe we'll be able to check the stones in the Tecolote village and see how many of them are there. I mean, we do. My house, it has vigas from Pandaray. It has adobes from Springer. And so this goes on, you know, and many of you have done the same thing over the years. But in 31, Texas Tech University at Lubbock, William Holden came over with students, and they worked there for 2 years, 2 summers. And they excavated, I indicated the mounds. I will point those out a little bit more on the map that we have prepared here on the site. But the mounds have been labeled, and so he worked at several of them. Next. Now, this is 1932. Marjorie Ferguson was an instructor here at New Mexico Normal School, which is Highlands today. She went out there and she had huge crews. We found a lot of the photographs at the State Archives in Santa Fe, and I put in a couple of them here. But on the left is some of her crew standing on the bank above the river. Then in the middle is a kiva that is stone lined, thousands of sandstone blocks in that. Now, where are they today? Maybe they've all gone downstream and they're in the Gulf of Mexico, but they're not there anymore. Then another thing that they report is in the next slide, and you can't see it real well, but of slab-lined floors. They put sandstone paving, on the floors in some of the rooms. The one on the right is a stone square room block that they excavated. They moved a tremendous amount of material. Now, in their work, in the 29 with the Watkins Horner, and they dug big trenches, and they did not do backfilling. They didn't fill them in. And there were some heavy rains, and much of that eroded. So it was a tremendous loss at that time. In 1959 to 62, we have quite a hiatus there. Floyd Snyder. There are a number of tests and probes that seem to be taking place on the site. And he indicates he finds some more walls. He may have another kiva, he thought. Some of these are finding old evidence of how previous people have worked. And so it's not clear. The reports are not very enlightening in many cases. In 68, Mr. and Mrs. Breeding apparently were friends of Snyder, came in and did some work. Next. And they really didn't produce anything that we have any record of. Then McNair, Robert Lee McNair, and he worked out there for one fall. And the first time we see a kind of a grid system set up, that he was trying to record items according to certain kind of provenience. Then in the fall of 1970 and summers of 71, 72, I began to do some field work there, and we set up a little more elaborate grid system on one of the mounds. And there were some burials that came out. And then Robertson did some work there. We had some of them come out with their students. Next. And Elder Hostel. We had several Elder Hostel programs there, which is now called Rhodes Scholar Program. Then in 92, we left the site for a while. We were working someplace else. 92, 93, and up to about 2000, we did some more intense work there. One of the things that we did was to map the site. This is a map of the site that we prepared. We set a primary datum down in the lower left. We gridded the entire about 12 acres, 10 acres into 25 square meter blocks. And those are recorded on there. You may not be able to see them at a distance. And then that went clear up to the river. And so everything that is done now can be done and say, okay, we know within 1 square meter where we are on the site, and it all has a number and a label that can record that. So if you, okay, so you point there should be a grid block of 25 square meters. It has a number in it. And then each of the grid blocks, they're 5 by 5, and those are broken down into A, B, C, D, E, F, G, up to X, Y, I guess 25 letters. And so that's important. Whenever you're doing archaeology is the context. Where is the material from? And then we always excavate in 5-centimeter horizons. These are artificial horizons. We, with trowels, 5-inch trowels, and we go down 5 centimeters in a 1-meter grid square, like you saw in that early photograph, and record things, go down another 5 centimeters, and so on. The bank along there, if you could show that again, that terrace bank along here, the river's right there. This bank, which is about 110 meters long, we shaved it and read it. There's a signature there with stratigraphy. And looking at where there is, what material, what evidence is there of human occupation with pottery, with ash, with bone, whatever. And then you go down to when you run into sterile, just native sediment that's there. And that is basically the level that the people came in and lived upon when they arrived. And so the other thing is that bank is eroding. And so each year it goes back a way. So we wanted to record it. So we have a photographic record, a descriptive record of that whole bank, which is very interesting and revealing as to what is or is not there. And when you look at mounds, you think all that mound is from human remains, the debris that they have left. And that's often not the case. We went across that Mound A, if you will look at Mound A, which is right there. We laid that off and put in 96 cores, 3-inch cores. Not excavate, but we just sent a core down, and I guess I have a picture of that later. I'll show you. We wanted to know what was the surface like when those people came in. Was there a mound there? Or is all of that accumulation of the debris from them living there? So you may not see this well, but here is the mound. We went down to where we hit sterile soil, recorded that and all these sites, threw that into the computer, and asked us to map the surface of that site when those people first arrived. And here's what we got. It was already a mound. It was a mound. They came in and settled on a rise that was currently there, which is very interesting to find, because you don't know that until you begin to kind of probe underneath and see what was there. Okay. There, it looks like about 65 weeks of field investigations that have been taking place out there at the site, as near as we can calculate. Okay, there are just some photographs of one of the things that we found is from doing this terrace edge. We didn't know it was there, but as we shaved that edge, we found a profile of a room floor. And this is the room. It's a mud floor, and it has a little adobe wall around it. It's about 15 centimeters, about that wide. And there's a fire hearth right there. These 2 blocks are left. Excavation techniques today are not going to be anything comparable to what may take place 100 years from now. And so it's good practice to just leave a block in that room, so that if somebody else wants to come back and look at it, and they say, Mishler's records show this, he was all screwed up. And we find in this record, we can look at it and maybe refine it or find something else. But that's what this other block was taken out later. And attached to that room at the same level was this passageway, which goes over to what was, we think, a kiva that was found earlier. So they may have been able to move from this room over to this room into a kiva. This is a little, just a post hole that was dug, kind of an enlarged view of it. And there are some of the students standing in this room trying to take a break. Yes, okay. There's the terrace edge that was we shaved, and some places we found deep depression of fill material, culture material, and this was exciting. There, while we looked at this profile, we found it looked like a soil change of about this wide that was going back, and we followed it, went back right to that tree, and we tried to interpret some of the 1929 records, and they had a 9-foot trench that they had put in. We think that's their trench. They had filled in later, and notice in the bottom picture there, you see what's on the bottom, you know what that is? That's close. It's the root. It's the root of that juniper tree. Oh. And nature can tell you a great deal about, and tell you where to dig. This was a trench. It eventually filled in with soft material. It's a recent, say the last 70 years. That root, of course, followed that trench because it was the line of least resistance. And there was undoubtedly more moisture in that. And so I found the same thing with rodents. Rodents follow their route, and they're going right along an adobe wall. They don't go into the adobe wall because it's harder material. We found some basketry, or just a mat that was made out of narrow leaf yucca. And here is there's the core hole, and we take out about 10 centimeter intervals like this, and you notice here's a soil change in color, and this is the top level, and this is going down in cultural material, and then eventually you get into a very sterile level again. Yes.